Exceptions to the warrant requirement. Let's talk about it today on the Half a Day Show. Welcome back to the Half a Day Show, and today we are going to address exceptions to the warrant requirement. Let me give you the language of the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures, right? Protects us from the government. So government actors include law enforcement, anybody that represents the state, like a public university or a public school, the postal service. It's so many people that fall under government actors, and they can violate your Fourth Amendment rights. However, people who can't violate your Fourth Amendment right, private corporations and entities such as Walmart, Amazon, Google, they cannot violate your Fourth Amendment rights. Okay, now that that's covered, let's get back to the Fourth Amendment. So the Fourth Amendment protects us from unreasonable searches and seizure. Reasonableness is protected under two clauses: an expectation of privacy, which comes from Katz, and the physical trespass doctrine, which comes from another case. I can't recall it right at the time, but that's that first prong. Second prong is a search or seizure which is produced by a valid warrant. What makes a warrant valid is it is based on probable cause issued by a neutral and detached magistrate, and it describes with particularity the places to be searched or the people or things to be seized, right? So that's the Fourth Amendment. However, like all the amendments included in the Bill of Rights, there are exceptions where they can restrict your Fourth Amendment rights and protections. There's about 8 or so exceptions to the warrant requirement. Today we're going to cover 3. The 3 we're going to cover are consent, ceta, and exigent circumstances. I'm looking at my notes in case y'all wondering. Got my notes in front of me because it's a lot of information. So let's talk about consent. This is a very important topic. I could probably talk about the different types of consent for well over an hour. Listen up if you want some weirdo shit. Excuse my language, kids. This is important. So the legal consent can also be applied to the real world. No means no. And there are 3 things that I would like to stress for both legal interactions and other interactions in life. So, first thing with consent. Consent must be voluntary, right? Meaning, you cannot coerce somebody to give you access, permission to do something for them or to do something with them. You know what I'm talking about. You can't coerce them. If you are coercing them, you are violating consent. Now let's apply that to law enforcement interactions. Say you get pulled over for speeding, and cop says, I smell a suspicious odor. Do you mind if I search your car? This is an example of where they're requesting your consent. Now if they say, if you don't let me search your car, you're going to jail, it's coercion, that's coercion. And if they say, if they do something like that, they intimidate you in a police-dominated environment, and they force you to give consent, whatever they find from that might not be valid. Depends on who the judge is. It's another story. Consent must be voluntary, right? Another thing with consent. So as you know, with other interactions in life, there are certain people who cannot give consent. Let's talk about it. If you are intoxicated via some controlled substance like alcohol, any class of drug, anything that impairs your conscience, right? You can't give consent. Who else can't give consent? Say you're not a native English speaker and you get pulled over in that same thing, you're speeding. And the cop, the only thing you understand from the cop is, need your license and registration. And they request from you they request access to your car to search your trunk just because. and you don't speak English fluently enough, and you express that to them, you can't give them consent. In order to give consent, you need to be properly informed, and you need to understand what you're doing, right? Next, let's talk about scope. When you are giving somebody consent, you have the ability to tell them just exactly what you want them to search or seize, right? So scope is very important, you see, because it applies to both the legal realm and regular everyday life. If somebody tells you or agrees to do one thing and you change the stipulation or the circumstances to what they agreed to, you violated their consent. Apply that how you need to. Fellas, wake the hell up. So, with legal interactions such as with law enforcement, if the police officer asks to search your passenger seat, or they ask to search your car, you can tell them just exactly what part of the car you want them to search. If they want to search anything else, they need to go and get a warrant, or they need to use another exception, or what have you. Last thing you need to remember about consent, it can be waived at any given point in time. If you grant somebody permission to do something with you, if you no longer want to do that thing, you can take it back. Apply that to legal realm, apply that to everyday life. Fellas, if she's not feeling it in the middle or in the end, and she says stop, stop. That's all I'm going to say on that. If you're doing anything else besides stopping, if they recant their consent, their permission, their access that they gave you, you are now sexually assaulting, raping somebody. I won't have it. Wake up. Now let's talk about ceta. What in the world is ceta? Search incident to arrest, to a lawful arrest. That lawful part is very important. And arrest is also important. If you're detained, ceta does not apply. They cannot search you until you are arrested, unless there's some other circumstance which gives them the ability to search you, right? ceta is based upon two things: preservation of evidence and officer safety, right? The idea behind this is once you are under a legal arrest, they can search your body and the immediate area around you to make sure that there is nothing criminal that might get away from them that they need to preserve when they're going to build a case against you, or nothing that can harm them, like if you decide to escape and you can go get a weapon or something like that. Officer safety is what they base ceta upon majority of the time, right? So, what exactly is incident to arrest? The language here is kind of very specific, but incident arrest basically means in response to or as a result of a legal arrest. Next thing, what exactly can they search? They can search the immediate area under the person they arrested's control. So say I get arrested right now. They can search this entire room because this entire room is under my control, right? Now say I'm in the living room. I was arrested in the living room. They cannot go and search this room. They cannot go and search this room. They can't search my roommate's room either. Say I'm arrested downstairs, parking lot. They can't come upstairs and arrest me in my, go and search my house, right? No. They can search my body. They can pat me down, pockets, all that, everything on my person. But they cannot search anything beyond my area of immediate control. Anything else, go get a warrant for it. And that's ceta. So our last one today that we're going to talk about is exigent circumstances. The word exigent, just liken that to emergency or dire, very serious circumstance, right? The courts created this one to allow police to react without the pressure of having to go and get a warrant. Let's give some examples of exigent circumstances. 9 times out of 10, what they're using exigent circumstances for is preservation of evidence, hot pursuit of a fleeing felon. They bust in your house to search and they see somebody running out the back door, jumping out the window. They can now search your house and they can go and arrest you without a warrant too, because now you are fleeing the area and you're now considered evidence. They need to preserve that when they're building a case against you. Shocker, right? Another one is officer safety. Same thing with ceta. They can base a exigent circumstance for their own safety as law enforcement. In order for exigent circumstance to be applied and to remove the warrant exception, right, needs to be three things. There needs to be one, an exigency. Two, the officer cannot create that exigency. And three, this is important, the burden of proof for the exigency is on the government to prove. You don't need to prove that there was no exigency. They need to prove that there was one. The presence of the exigency themselves is based on the government. So what did we cover today? We talked about exemptions to the warrant requirement. We didn't get to all of them, but we did list the three most commonly misinterpreted. First one was consent. Second one was ceta, which is search incident to arrest. And the third one is exigent circumstance. Remember, with consent, you can waive it at any given point, and you can limit the scope with that. For two, with ceta, they cannot search anything that is outside of your immediate control. They can search your body and can search the area around you for officer safety and for the preservation of evidence. And with exigent circumstance, remember, they cannot create the exigent circumstance like how they did with Breonna Taylor. Arrest them, arrest them, arrest them. They cannot create that exigent circumstance. And remember, lastly, the burden of proof for exigent circumstance lies on the government to prove. You don't need to prove that you weren't doing anything. You just need to show up to court, right? As always, this has been the Half a Day Show, giving you education, entertainment, and everything else in between. If you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. Like, comment, and share the message. Peace.